Hello, good afternoon or good evening. Welcome to a platform conversation we're hosting today before the exhibition opening of Cassandra Press on self-defense, Cassandra Press Reader in Action. A project that we have developed here at Bergen Kunsthall together with artist Kandis Williams and artist Jade Guarano Kuriki-Olivo, Puppies Puppies. And it's a special project for us because it is a project in process that will happen also over a longer time frame, happening here and in general in two phases. The first part is a presentation of Cassandra Press publications downstairs in Gallery 5. And then the second part, a new project on self-defense, focusing on models of self-protection based on historical or research, and also courses that Cassandra Press offers in places for people identifying as part of trans and BIPOC communities. And so we have this talk here today to talk a bit mainly about Cassandra Press and also about a look out into the project as it will develop. I talk a bit about quickly about Cassandra Press. It was founded in 2016 by artist Kandis Williams as an independent publishing project, producing readers, catalogues, and artist zines, and also organizing classrooms. And as its core, Cassandra Press examines tools of perception and racism and their dominant role and expressions within the current sociocultural systems. Cassandra Press also organizes exhibitions, most recently at Luma Westbau in Zurich, Circa London in spring 2022, and at the Whitney Biennial 2022, quite as it's kept. And Kandis Williams, who's here with us today, works besides her role within Cassandra Press also as an artist, writer, editor, and publisher, and has exhibited widely, most recently also at the Whitney Biennial in 2022. And she also produced the inaugural show for 52 Walker, a gallery space by David Zwirner, programmed and led by senior director Ebony Haynes. Kandis will be now in conversation with Nora Svantje-Almes, curator for live program at Bergen Kunsthall, who worked with me on this exhibition. And I hand over and look forward to an interesting conversation. Maybe a few practical remarks. The event is live streamed and recorded, so there are cameras around in case you be aware that there are cameras in the room. We have around 50 minutes for the conversation, I think, before we start with the opening downstairs. And toilets are here behind this door on the, from my side, left side of the stage. Yeah, thank you very much, Nora. Thank you so much, Kandis. Looking forward to hear you.
I'm not sure. Yeah, now it works. Thank you all for coming. I'm really happy to have Kandis here with us in Bergen today. And also great to be able to just talk about Cassandra Press, what the framework of Cassandra Press is, but also about the project here with Bergen Kunsthall, which is a project on self-defense. And you will see the work of Cassandra Press downstairs in the galleries in a little bit. So, Kandis, I thought maybe we start off just with talking about what Cassandra Press is. Cassandra is a figure in Greek mythology, but also what the figure of Cassandra maybe, how it relates to the publishing practice that you have with Cassandra Press. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. So Cassandra, there's a few different versions of this myth. The one that I really like is that Cassandra was the daughter of King Priam, and she was cursed by the god Apollo with the gift of prophecy. And this was a curse because while she was given the gift to see the future, she was denied believability. So she was cursed essentially to prophesize the future and to not be believed. And so she's kind of marked as this hysterical woman. And, you know, in common vernacular, she's thought of as a hysterical woman. And the myth that I'm really drawn to with Cassandra is one in which she approaches her father around the time of the sack of Troy, before the sack of Troy. She's actually one of the only figures in Greek mythology to foresee the fall of Troy. And she tells him, like, look, I've written 3 books of prophecy, and they're really important to our kingdom surviving. And he denies her gift. She actually has a brother named Helenus, and he's believed. So she ends up teaching Helenus the prophecy so that a male voice can speak to the people so that she can actually be heard. But what she does is that she approaches her father twice, and every time he denies her prophecy, she destroys 1 book. So thinking about Cassandra and thinking about this collage process of like destroying books in order to sort of put together new ones, I really relate to this process of sort of writing books to destroy them when they're not taken into sort of popular account. And yeah, so she approaches him again, he denies her, destroys another book, and in the last book he finally says, okay, and she says, well, it's worth a kingdom now. And at that point, it's, you know, the eve of the fall of Troy. So, yeah, I think the way Cassandra relates to my publishing practice is really to take not necessarily only Black feminist authors, but authors who are thinking about structural racism in order to produce new hegemonic models or new pedagogical models. And how this is sort of always considered, you know, fringe. Like when I was in school, it was literally called revisionist history, what we would understand now to be history that understands critical race theory. So, you know, I use Cassandra as this model for a lot of Black women who are publicly, in so many ways, this is, you know, the last essay in this is a Joy James essay called Shadowboxing. But so many Black women are shadowboxing this representation of us as Mammy, Jezebel, or Sapphire, while also being lauded, let's say, or elevated as voices in this moment that society should be sort of adhering to or maybe even hearing for the first time. So there's another sort of prophecy and deniability, I think, that is inherent to the role of Black feminist theorists.
Do you want to introduce a bit what exactly you're doing with the readers and just the scope of it, maybe?
I don't know about scope. With the readers, I think of them as like a. So we do artist scenes as well. So I use. I think I curate Black and brown artists of color to make their own artist scenes, and we print, you know, whatever the artist really wants. So we don't have a mandate necessarily on the kind of content with the artist scenes. That's really, you know, it's my own personal curation. It's a lot of friends, colleagues, people who I love and whose voices I love and whose practices I love. And then with the scope of the readers, I think that for me has yet to be foreseen in a way. You know, I think I've been making these readers since 2016. And it's funny because they vault almost in popularity, or their scope broadens every time there is a political upheaval. And for a really long time, I felt very ignored, you know, especially as an artist, as a woman, as, you know, a marginal body. But then there are these moments, and I think these, especially diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives from major institutions that have really gained a lot of popularity for the press, and it puts us in a super precarious position in terms of the scope of the readers. Yeah.
You mean in terms of being able to print, or?
No, in terms of intellectual distribution, I think. And the readers become almost transitional objects. Because they're so pedagogical in nature. They're curriculums that are sort of hobbled together pieces of and evacuated sort of other general curriculums. So their scope is something that I'm not even sure of anymore.
Yeah, I just think about also Cassandra Press as maybe an extension, because it kind of came out of your, I guess, like artistic practice of, you've worked with collages a lot, and then thinking about putting together or accumulating different texts and, you know, reorganizing in some way. So I guess what I'm curious about is to maybe talk a bit about the beginning of Cassandra Press and how, in terms of scope, I'm talking about how it developed in different areas, because it started out with this making a reader, and then there were different elements added, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Our first exhibition was at the Printed Matter bookstore in New York, and I didn't think of them as exhibition material. I essentially don't make any money off Cassandra. I pay to print, or people pay to print for me to print, right? So it's like, it's always been a super interesting question in terms of collage practice and circulation. Like, in some ways, Cassandra is my most supported and disseminated collage form, right? Like, individual collages are often bought by people who can afford them, versus these collages that are, you know, I can make available for free to Black and brown people if, you know, if institutions help me pay for them, like the Kunsthall has. So we'll be distributing a lot of text through the Kunsthall, which is great. And yeah, in terms of like the development, they feel really hand in hand. Like, I make choreographies, I do dramaturgy, so a big part of my practice and how I relate to other artists' practices has always been through research. With the collage work, it's very much about, you know, sort of transubstantiating almost, like chewing up something and spitting it back out and calling that, you know, calling it gold in a way. So that's been a super interesting process, I guess. Starting out in 2016, yeah, it was very interesting. I think even going to the zine fairs, like Printed Matter, I started showing with them in 2015, I think. 16 was the very first art fair or Printed Matter zine book fair that we participated in. And I remember even back then, it was very much, you know, like white bros with sexist t-shirts. And in the last few years, it's been, you know, more of, especially this diversity, equity, inclusion, sort of Black publishers and Black artists are being focused on, I'll say, for this moment. And I think a lot of that has been outside of my control in a weird way.
I was wondering, so what interested you in this practice of publishing as a critical practice? Because as you already kind of touched on it in terms of, as an artwork, you know, someone can buy it, or it is in, like, I don't know, certain spaces and so on. So what triggered that interest in the idea of publishing?
I guess I've always been interested in publishing. I think even as a dramaturg, you know, putting together text for people to sort of take home and think about or ruminate. As a choreographer, I think a lot about rhythm and pacing and distance. So for me, you know, this idea of connecting dots is a critical practice, and collage has always been about point, line, plane in that way, you know, like connecting dots. I think also back to this idea of being forced in school to call any Black-centered study marginal, or to call it even revisionist, has been a serious point of critical contention, and really just sort of putting together not just theoretical text, because I know that you know, the academy is extremely racist, and for a lot of Black students, and this comes out of years of teaching in fine art and arts institutions, but a lot of Black students have a lot of access issues, especially with language, with appropriation, and with feeling really misrepresented or underrepresented in academia. So it was really important for me to sort of put editorials from young Black voices next to, say, a JSTOR article from a scholar, a Black scholar who is probably, you know, not accessible actually to so many Black students because of the paywalls of JSTOR, but also because of how our institutions are structured. You know, we have no real public education system in America. So I think making texts and associations or curriculum available to people who aren't able to afford school is inherently radical for no reason, really. It shouldn't be, and yet it is. So that's one of those weird sort of places where white supremacy becomes invisible, but actually shapes so much of our self-determination.
I actually wanted to talk a bit more about this access, because you have first of all, I guess one of the expansions is also Cassandra Press Classrooms, which is like it's courses basically, no? based on some of the readers and artist zines, as far as I saw. And that is, of course, one version of alternative education, let's say. It doesn't have to... alternative we can probably put in brackets, but yeah, this access idea, and I also saw that you work with open source, and you know, the presentation in exhibition spaces as places for self-study. So I think it's not only the methodology in that you have. Like the redistribution of knowledge or the reshuffling of knowledge, or you know, recentering. It's also in the structures on like how you run it, especially with the access stuff and open source and stuff. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, in 2020 was a very hard year. So 2020 was one of those years. I think a lot about something Adrian Piper said in the 60s, in 1965. Where she said, you know, the things happening outside the studio, I'm paraphrasing extremely because we know Adrian Piper is quite dense, but she said the things happening outside of her studio changed the shape of what was happening inside the studio. And I think that was very similar for the press. You know, for years, I think my own intellectuality has always been weaponized against me. And yeah, and something happened in 2020. There was a shift around the George Floyd massacre. Uprisings were happening all over the world, and it just felt like a really important time to reorient the notion of the classroom. So actually the classrooms aren't necessarily based on my readers. They're, Manuel was one of our first teachers, my first teachers, Rhea Dillon, so many instructors, Darius Carter, were just Black thinkers that I think could lead these conversations, who had the nuance and the capacity to lead these conversations amongst a sea of very questioning voices. And especially I think when people are questioning what we saw in 2020, which was especially constitutional politics at work, it was very important for me to act. And so the action I took was not, you know, to go into the streets, but to actually develop these classrooms. And I act now as a kind of registrar, primarily. I can't take credit for the classrooms. I've only taught one. I can give all the credit to my teachers, actually, who make this very intimate space to exchange knowledge, and who are so dedicated in their practices that they can create, you know, again, connecting dots, you know, to form real tissue and meat, you know, and really give these kind of conversations life. So I was super excited in 2020 to launch the classrooms, because I saw them in tandem with a lot of the action happening on the street. So these calls for change to social structures and social policies that enable white supremacy, it was very important for me to create space for Black thought.
I have, because you do work with, as you said, dominantly Black thinkers, and I was wondering how you land on the different themes, because, you know, some of them have like, I mean, with some I see like almost like pop references, and yeah, there's sometimes a link to myth, but also technology, and you know, when you go through the titles of the readers, it feels, how do you land on a topic like this?
Well, they're very personal. So the topics are all very personal questions that I have for the world, I guess. And what I find frustrating as a Black scholar myself is that Black studies is always partitioned from real life, you know? And I think that's very intentional on behalf of most institutions, right? They don't want Black thought in the streets, because that could potentially produce a Black republic, which so many social policies, from economics to agriculture, are really geared to either deafen or eviscerate. So it's really dealing with this kind of logic of evisceration. This is a term from Dylan Rodriguez, but white supremacy functions on a logic not just to erase, right, but to completely destroy. And for me, you know, looking at my personal life, like the very first reader was actually a reader on misogynoir. And it was very important for me. It's 5 volumes. So the readers are all my mania, my very particular mania, which is that if I don't understand something or I'm constantly confronted with a logic that I can't grasp or that I feel is false, then I tend to research. So misogyny was really important, and there's 5 chapters. One is, and they're all very personal to my own, navigating white supremacist discourse and white supremacist society. The first chapter is Mammy, Jezebel, Sapphire, and their fallout. So thinking about the consequences of these 3 archetypes of Black womanhood, hypersexualized, angry, or maternal, right? Those are like pretty much the 3 avenues that people associate Black womanhood, or avenues, it's a bad word, but negative caricatures that people associate with Black womanhood. And when I say woman, just know that I mean cis and trans, just because that's woman. But yeah, this identity and how it's sort of shaped by so many social policies of people who don't represent it, right? Like, these are all external and negative caricatures that are constantly represented in media that we have to navigate as people, as individuals. So one of the first essays I found was by Carolyn West, and she wrote about Mammy, Jezebel, Sapphire and their psychological fallout. So the inability that Black women have to even, get appropriate therapy, right? Because often our therapists will be white educated people who understand our bodies and mentalities and emotions through popular media. So in that way, for me, definitely thinking about how to link a lot of these academic fields to what's happening every day in the street, whether it's all like White Lives Matter fashion show by Kanye, or it's Biden's policies on decriminalizing marijuana on a federal level. All of these things do relate to Blackness and how Blackness is policed, enforced and incentivized in some ways to produce anti-Blackness. And I'm super interested in that linkage, because I think that's something that Black people experience. We're inundated with popular cultural messages. So much Black scholarship is actually a digestion of popular music and entertainment. So it doesn't make any sense for me, in a way, to separate them. Like, it's just as important, the conversation on TikTok, as what's happening at Yale, right?
Yeah. No, I think it also deconstructs what we consider important or worth studying, or what academia can be, and I think breaking that down on at least a similar hierarchy is quite interesting. Maybe this leads us actually quite nicely to the reader on self-defense, and I was wondering if we should maybe start from the beginning in terms of how did you come about the theme, and what were the thought processes that led to this?
So the reader on self-defense actually started around the time of the Whitney, and there was a really big, the beginning, Jesus. I mean, I'm like, where's the beginning of this conversation?
Somewhere.
So this will be the 6th solo museum installation that Cassandra has done in 2 years, 3 years. No, it's 2 years. It's not even the end of 2022, is it? So we had our first one at the beginning of 2020.
Right.
So in exactly 2 years almost, we've had 7 major institutional exhibitions, and each one has taken a little bit of my heart and soul away from me, I have to say. It brings me further and further away often from my community. It creates, extreme sort of wedges, intellectual wedges between me and my community. And I was thinking a lot about how to defend myself, right? Like, what is the self? What is the self in defense? What is self-defense without producing harm? So installing at the Whitney, obviously Eli Whitney, the creator of the cotton gin, installing in that space was extremely difficult and very violent. And I think I kept thinking about how I can be stronger, faster, how my reflexes could be tuned maybe to understanding kind of like white supremacist violence and violence from individual attackers. So I think thinking about what Cassandra meant in that space and trying to navigate that internally started a lot of the collection of these essays. So thinking about, I mean, it started very basically and very personally, as most of the readers do, what I can do to protect myself. And then also talking to Jade, Jade about what we can do to protect our community and how protection can be thought of in multiple ways and simultaneously. So from, you know, actually learning how to like kick someone into submission to, or to fend off an attacker, a violent attacker, and also how to sort of spiritually guard oneself, how to spiritually protect oneself, how to psychologically protect oneself, how to verbally defend oneself. All those became super important, I think, at that exhibition level. And that's when I really started gathering these texts. And then for this exhibition, it's funny because they all start, you know, very similarly. This time Jade actually commissioned, I would say, and approached me to be a part of the show. It was originally her show. I think it's really important to say because I feel very grateful to Jade in so many ways. Just endless gratitude actually for Jade, but I also understand her position. And so, you know, being marginalized bodies and constantly sort of put in this position of having to check certain boxes, right, for certain funding groups, and also being kind of ghettoized into that same sort of marginal pool, right? Black women and trans women were in the same boat in so many ways. And so a conversation really started between Jade and I around how to protect our communities from, you know, the multiple kinds of abuses and exploitation that we, you know, undergo daily. So yeah, thinking about Jade's process and her work and her, personal sort of means of defense as well, both. So that sort of like opened up the conversation on how we defend ourselves. And that was the beginning of this show.
Yeah. I know that you also brought a couple of things you wanted to share on the computer. Now,
yeah.
Shall we go in?
Yeah,
Do you
sure.
want to? Or?
Yeah. I think I'll just sort of say a few words about the reader.
Yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
So the reader on self-defense is really thinking about, and this is, you know, I was very frustrated organizing this show in Norway, which we've talked about extensively. But the production kind of this sort of funding for marginalized, I would say, because we aren't actually marginal, but marginalized bodies, Black bodies, POC bodies in spaces, white institutions especially. Super frustrating. And I had a rant prepared. But the word compassion has come to me 3 times today without thinking about it, without looking for it. Sonia Renee Taylor, who's a real a genius writer and activist, had a "What's up, y'all?" So happy birthday, Sonia. Thank you for being the first compassion today. But she talked about doing a tarot reading for a white man, and and how extremely, she's a very generous person, obviously, but how much compassion she was able to generate for this white man who has the burden, right, of inheriting this kind of monsterdom, this monstrous coloniality, this kind of dominion over others that negates his own humanity. And something that she, extended was this kind of compassionate awareness. And and then I've seen compassion several other times today. But it was really important to me, I think, to not rant, but to sort of extend this compassion. So the reader on self-defense, and I want to think about Cassandra as an education project around compassion. I'm often asked why participate in white institutions, why participate in white cubes. And the reality is something that I think my mentor and a theorist, Bracha Ettinger, has said in her book, The Matrixial Border Space. But she said 2 very important things that have always stuck with me, which is, one is that there is an impossibility of not sharing this world. And that's something really intense to let sink in, right? Like even the production of a lot of radical Black thought produces us as segregated from the policies we exist in, segregated from the places we live in, right? Ghettoizes us into sort of almost moralistically only being able to participate where we aren't. And I think that's a real problem. So a lot of the texts and the texts that you'll see downstairs, they center Black thought, but they aren't entirely or exclusively Black thought, right? This is anyone who's able to see that Blackness as a construct is the construct of slavery that disseminates and touches all of us, right? This concept of the slave and the master separates all of us from our humanity. And so there's a real intention, I think, for white people to also, I'm extending this compassion in order to receive it, but I think there's a real necessity to redefine ideas of fragility, ideas of safety, and ideas of sensitivity for white people, right? I was in Switzerland and I'd been, not in Switzerland, oh God, I was in France and I had gone through a summer of being racially assaulted. So I was racially assaulted 3 times. And I had dinner with a all-white group of people. And one girl was like, oh, you seem so nervous and anxious. And I couldn't tell her really, but I was like, yeah, you were all making me nervous because I've been assaulted a couple times by people who look like you, right? Mm. And she's like, oh, I know this book called The Highly Sensitive Person. You need to read this book. And I thought to myself, this is whiteness, right? That people can be so unaware of the colonial predicaments and the racial predicaments of other people that they can, and still consider themselves sensitive, right? Mm. She can be totally unaware of my actual experience, even if I'm talking to her about it, negate my lived experience, and then still consider herself a sensitive person. So I think there's a reason too, because sensitivity, especially when you start training, you're really training your sensitivity, right? You're training yourself not to hit and lash out. You're training yourself to know when harm is present and when danger is present. And this is the sad part about whiteness, right? It gives a small minority of people an advantage and a kind of conceptual safety, but then it produces everyone else as dangerous. So that's my sort of like, you know, small bit of compassion for this rant, is that I think what white supremacy does is that it creates, you know, it creates so much harm for everyone. It creates so much danger for everyone, whether you're white or not, right? Because even as a white being white means that everyone else who's not has something to take from you, right? Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of, it builds not only resentment and xenophobia, but a constant fear of assault. And I'll show you some, this is exactly sort of what I'm talking about. In the reader, we sectioned off, I sectioned off a whole section that's just dealing with what it means when white people defend themselves, right? Because this is an extremely racialized conversation. I'm making a reader on self-defense for Black people and for people who are of color in proximity to Blackness, right? Not people of color who are in proximity to whiteness, but people of color who are in proximity to Blackness, right? And for us, we have to defend against white supremacist systems of domination. White people, on the other hand, who have that protection, right? Who understand that whiteness is equal to property and equal to sovereignty, end up using this kind of same ideologies, right, of self-defense to create massive, devastating, eviscerating systems of exploitation. So I think it's really important to remind people, before you get to read this reader, that there is a section of it that's just dealing with, one, white fragility is a misnomer, right? We're not dealing with white fragility. White defensiveness is, there's a lot of white defensiveness. This whole section on white defensiveness in the reader is sectioned off, because that defensiveness is interpersonal violence to so many others. So I think it's really important to say that, and I'll show just like a brief kind of what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Don't have to subscribe to anything, YouTube. But this is Amy Cooper, and this happened in the summer of 2020.
Please stop. Sir, I'm asking you to stop.
Please don't come close to me.
Sir, I'm asking you to stop recording me.
Please don't come close to me.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to
And
me.
I'm taking a picture and calling the cops.
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, I'm in the ramble, and there is a man, African American, he has a bicycle helmet. He is recording me and threatening me and my dog. There is an African American man, I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog. I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. I'm being threatened by a man in the ramble. Please send the cops immediately. I'm in Central Park in the ramble. I don't know.
Thank you.
So we'll just drive the point home a little bit more. And these
I'm going to tell you, there's an African American man threatening my life.
compilations are also everywhere. I feel like the Karen meme is really important to sort of understand that it's not just a meme, right?
Sir, I'm asking you to stop recording me.
Please don't come close to me.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to
And
me.
I'm taking a picture and calling the cops.
Please.
So while she's calling the police on someone who's threatening her dog, she's choking her dog out.
And everybody, and thank you as always for tuning.
Wait, where are we sound-wise? I'll just close this one.
Yeah, that's good.
Decides to take a stand against the mask policy at this.
Really close.
Are you?
Say hi. We don't like to. Do you think I want to wear?
Yes,
a
I do.
mask?
Yes,
I
I
do
do.
not want to
You
wear. a
are
mask.
ashamed,
I have to
just
wear
like the rest of them.
Why
Sorry,
don't you
but
people
you need to
educate
leave.
yourselves? You need to.
How am I
leave
doing?
now.
My critic you?
You're really close. To
Are
me.
you afraid? You should run away.
I don't like.
But
how
you
close
have
you
your
are.
super mask on.
I'm trying to protect you.
I don't need protection from you.
Oh, you just touched me. I
Oh,
really wish you hadn't.
no, I touched you.
Here,
I'm going to get COVID.
No, you're probably going to give it to me. Are you going to leave?
Look at you.
Are you going to leave the store?
Shame. Are you going to leave the store? Are you going to leave the store? Are you going to leave the store?
and aggressive to
Do
another
you
customer.
know-
Would you please leave?
I'm aggressive?
Would you
I
please
came. Okay. Now, the
Would
thing
you
I wanted to
please
say,
leave?
which you wouldn't let me say, you won't see my face, right? If I ever come back here again, and this thing is proven to be a hoax, I want an apology from each and every one of you. See. Educate yourselves.
Wait till somebody you know is sick, and then you will see how much.
Nobody is sick, sweetheart.
Go for it.
Educate yourself.
Please leave.
Go online.
Please leave
and
now.
read and learn.
But yeah, just to sort of think about, especially, I'll leave this one up for a while. How do you do this? Tools, view, this one. Yeah, but just definitely to go back to my point, making this reader on self-defense, what I really want to reiterate is that white defensiveness is the reason why so many people have to defend themselves, right, interpersonally from especially white supremacist violence. And white supremacist delusion, another Sonia Renee Taylor term, but which is so evident, right, in these Karens, is that it's the delusion of being constantly under threat, even though you or yourself are using military, state-sanctioned violence to control even the smallest interactions in your life, right? Going into a store to buy something, putting other people in danger, but then having the dissonance, right, to launch yourself as the person who's a victim. So what white supremacy does is it creates, devastatingly, right? It creates victims out of all of us in so many ways. And so definitely thinking about what it is to protect your way of being as a Black person or a Black body, to protect being Black, but also to really sort of draw attention to white people, right? That white supremacist delusion is a way of being harmful. And a way of, constantly reiterating that harm in so many even unprovoked actions. So it was really important to me to think through, this question of the overseer, which is in these texts, this question of philanthropy as a kind of trap, and the incentivized violence, especially that white women get to enjoy under white supremacy, which is that white supremacist, white femininity, right, becomes this place of real structural and institutional protection, but it also causes so much harm and can be so harmful because it forecloses on a lot of our abilities to defend ourselves, right? Like, so that's been a real sort of like semantic battle I fought with myself in creating the reader, and then also in organizing the classes, right? And why also we very intentionally do not allow white people to participate in these self-defense classes, because I think there's a lot of, while you still should pick up the reader when we launch our self-defense classes, actually, they'll be available only to Black and POC women, and again, people in proximity to Blackness, so that there's training available there, right? But the reading, and a lot of the reading, other readings in the text are, the production of collectives, of people and of authors who've lived under constant threat of annihilation. There's a lot of text from the Black Panther Party, their 10-point platform on community defense and self-defense, the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Audre Lorde's The Uses of Anger, How Women Respond to Racism. There's a really amazing essay on Huey Newton's late theorizations on intercommunalism. Of course, Philosophical Art of Self-Defense by Bruce Lee, who was also extremely popular in the Black community for so many reasons. And then there's some essays that are thinking about how white supremacist culture produces against, again, this kind of victimization of white bodies and uses the self-victimhood in order to harm others. So there's an essay called Don't Talk to Me About Deception, the necessary erosion of the trans panic defense, which is a legal defense that men use to kill trans women. This is highly successful, right? All the time. So it's thinking again about the harmfulness of defending white nationality, right? And like the kind of training that goes into cultures that are constantly living on the brink of evisceration.
So we have the reader here, obviously, and also the entire collection of Cassandra Press publications. But Kandis, can you talk a bit about maybe the parts that are not happening within the exhibition space now? You touched on it slightly now, you are organizing these self-defense classes in different communities. But
there's two really good essays. Sorry to interrupt this.
No, go on.
Okay, there's a really great essay by Anne Tweedy called Hostile Indian Tribes, Outlaws, Wolves, Bears, Grizzlies, and things like that. And it's on how the Second Amendment and the Supreme Court precedent target tribal self-defense. So how they target indigenous self-defense to create Supreme Court mandates, which is so insane. And then there's other really amazing, Catherine Jacquette, which I think is actually a grad school dissertation. I don't think it's published really, but Responding to Rape, Contesting the Meanings of Sexual Violence in the United States, where she focuses on Joan Little and the Joan Little case. So self-defense, we will be launching in January with the finally generous funding we received from the Norway Kunsthall. We'll be launching self-defense courses. So we'll be donating, large sums of money to the trans legal defense funds, to various sort of trans activist funds. And we'll also be basically essentially giving out vouchers for people to train with Black instructors, self-defense, spiritual defense, and emotional and mental defense. So I'm very excited about that.
Do you see these courses? Because I noticed earlier that you called the teachers for the classrooms, you called them instructors as well, and you're calling do you see these self-defense courses as another classroom?
Totally, yeah. And I mean, it's been really interesting, right? Because like even trying to organize them, like one of the initial premises was like, who can we bring to Norway to teach? And while working on this, I really thought, this is, so anti this kind of self-defense that I'm thinking of, right? Like, I don't want to necessarily bring people to this space to learn, but there are so many people, especially like long histories of Black and brown people globally, right, who are doing interpersonal self-defense. Like, there's so many movements, especially in the Midwest, to protect Indigenous women that are, Indigenous women are some of the most persecuted women in our society, often victimized without any word, right, from major press or even within their community. So there are so many people doing this kind of really intense self-defense work in situ, in locale, where they are. that's extremely important to their communities. And so I wanted to think of a way to distribute this funding, right, that way. Not to have people have to move or come to spaces that are hostile, right? Yeah. In so many ways, but to actually, you know, help support them where they are. And so that's one of the ways that we've been thinking about this. We're also always open to, say this live stream, if you're a self-defense instructor or any kind of martial arts instructor, hit us up, because it's very easy for us to send some vouchers your way. And yeah, and we'll keep hopefully building this database of Black and BIPOC people globally who are training and helping support that training.
Yeah, exciting, really exciting. Are you going to participate in one of them, you think?
Oh God, I'm already in like all of them.
Yeah, okay. I thought maybe we open up to questions if there are any. For the last 5 minutes, yeah, go for it. Yeah, you're going to get a mic. Yeah.
No, it works, okay. First of all, thank you for a very, very interesting conversation. 1 hour is too short. Could you elaborate a bit on those courses? Where are they physically going to take place, and how can people learn about the courses and get access to the courses?
How you can learn about them is going to be an interesting question. Basically, I'm working with Sermons International, with Devon Sermons, to start organizing the classes, and they will be everywhere that they can be. So far, we have about 7 locations in New York City, 1 in Amsterdam, 1 in Paris, and 1 in Berlin. And the network is always growing. So I've used my own sort of social media and personal connections to try to create this database, but I'm really hoping that, you know, in the next month or so, we'll be getting submissions from local instructors, but also from people who want to take the classes. So we'll use primarily our Cassandra network and go out. Yeah, but I hope if you know anyone here, it's very hard. But yeah, if you know any Black or POC instructors here, please leave their name. So I would love to have something available here in Norway. Yeah, but that search continues, unfortunately. Yeah, so they'll be primarily in those 3 cities, but I'm super open to anywhere that people need it, right? Especially here.
Any more questions?
I was curious, given your background in choreography, do you see any relationship between sort of strategies of self-defense and sort of choreography, or any sort of performative dimension that might be at play there?
I mean, that's conceptually, and then in praxis, both, yes, deeply. So a lot of martial arts practices, Far East Asian martial arts practices come out of agrarian movements. So even studying kendo, a lot of that is movements that come out of farming. So I think there's a really strong and interesting connection there from farming. It goes farming, martial arts, literally, you know, theater. So that progression is very easy to see. Definitely reading, you know, Bruce Lee's sort of philosophy of self-defense. So much of it is a dance. So much of those movements are about responding to, it's almost a 2-person dance, right? So responding to someone's movements forward by moving backward. In boxing, it's really like you train in boxing by sort of like, and this is my friend Alex Hungtai was saying too, you know, you kind of try to visualize every strike possible. And that's choreography, essentially, you know, like that footwork, that frame, the way that you move your frame is very important to that timing and reflexes. I think so much about that, you know, like choreography is in step, self-defense is before a step. So that's a kind of interesting timing to sort of realign with. So it's almost, again, this kind of like forecasting of another person's movements, or a predictive kind of capacity for another person's movements, which really do help kind of train. Sorry, I forget what was the question again? Choreography.
That was pretty much the question.
Okay.
But if I could just ask a quick follow-up to that, just in terms of that anticipatory sort of aspect, do you think there's a possibility for self-defense without anxiety?
Yes, and that's one of the main reasons I started putting together these readers, was to combat anxiety. So combating anxiety, again, not necessarily through anxious anticipation, right? But knowing when to expect a blow that can harm you or kill you, and when to understand, the size or strength of your opponent. A lot of that was really important. And I think the training, the breath work, the spiritual protection also, me and Jade talk a lot about spiritual protection, but being able to sort of quiet your soul before you go into spaces that are hostile, before you go into spaces that are highly competitive, before you go into spaces that are anti-Black, is super important to this reader and to this work. And yeah, thinking about a lot of especially with the Black Panther Party, people like Marsha P. Johnson, just thinking about the anxiety that they must have been riddled with, right, to do the work that they did, and how we can step forward in terms of a civil rights movement that doesn't necessitate that kind of anxiety in the body, right, but that says, I'm going to protect myself, I'm going to stand and be present, and know that I can distinguish harm from harmful, right? And that was really important. Like, that's a great question, but it's super important to why I think these classes have to be, and have to be intentionally given to Black and POC people. Because there is a lot of anxiety because of how we aren't believed. And you see with the Karens, right? Like, this position of constantly being in fear, abstractly, conceptually, that is anxiety, right? And like, I feel like this kind of training the body, training the muscular reflex even, to understand the difference between a negative conversation and an actually physically harmful one is super important, because fight or flight, cortisol deregulation, high blood pressure, all of this is really, it's par for the course in Black and POC bodies. So learning how to like really tune those reflexes and tune that foresight, tune that anticipation, has been the biggest reason personally for me for this reader. I had a massive cortisol deregulation after the Whitney. I'm kind of just coming back out of it, but I wish that I had had this reader then, it's like, it's a real response. But yeah, that kind of like feeling of wanting to combat stress with preparedness is a lot of what this comes out of. Sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, we're doing one last one.
Thank you for your presence. My question is about the situation, political situation in USA. Especially, I'm interested to know if this racist incident has been on the rise since 2016 election, and how much also. My feeling is that both parties use race card. For instance, the Trump side or Republican side use white supremacists and also religious Christian extremists. And then on the other side, they use only identity politics and black card, without addressing the fundamental problem in the society to address the divide and create some sort of equal opportunity. For instance, the poverty rate, prisoners rate among among black people and also colored people that create going in a circle but never resolve the fundamental problem in the society.
What is the black card?
For instance, Trump used the white supremacist, and then the other side try to use black population for their win without addressing their fundamental problems.
What is the fundamental problem?
Addressing the poverty among black and colored people, addressing the key necessary legislation to change the situation, addressing the education among the colored people, addressing the high rate of prisoners among.
I get that. You don't think that. So the black card is not addressing that? What does the black card address?
It's just on the surface. Just on the surface, without addressing the fundamental problem. Obviously, there is a problem. They address this, but up to the point that they don't go to the bottom and the basic things that created such a situation, historically and currently, without addressing the fundamental issues.
Well, questions like yours are why I make readers. So I don't think there is a black card. I think that's a misrepresentation or a misunderstanding. But I'll just read from this is the Black Panther's 10-point program. So this is what the Black Panther Party wished for our society, right? 1, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our black and oppressed communities. We believe that black and oppressed people will not be free until we are able to determine our destinies in our own communities for ourselves, by fully controlling all the institutions which exist in our communities. 2, we want full employment for our people. We believe that the federal government is responsible and obligated to give every person employment or guaranteed income. 3, we want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our black and oppressed communities. We believe this racist government has robbed us, and we are now demanding the overdue debt of 40 acres and a mule. 40 acres and a mule were promised over 100 years ago as restitution for slave labor and mass murder of black people. We will accept the payment in currency, which is to be distributed to our communities. 4, we want decent housing, fit for the shelter of human beings. We believe that if landlords will not give decent housing to our black and oppressed communities, then housing and land should be made into cooperatives so that people in our communities with government aid can build and make decent housing for the people. 5, we want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present day society. We believe in an educational system that will give our people a knowledge of self. We believe in an educational system that will give our people knowledge of self. 6, we want completely free health care for all black and oppressed people. We believe that the government must provide free of charge for the people health facilities which will not only treat our illnesses, most of which have come about as a result of our oppression, but which we also develop preventative medical programs to guarantee for our survival. 7, we want an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of black people, other people of color, all oppressed people inside the United States. We believe that the racist and fascist government of the United States uses its domestic enforcement agencies to carry out its programs of oppression against people, black people, other people of color, and poor people inside and outside of the United States. And I'm paraphrasing these are longer. 8, we want an immediate end to all wars of aggression. Enough said. 9, we want freedom for all black and oppressed people now held in U.S. federal, state, county, city, and military prisons and jails. We want trials by a jury of peers for all persons charged with so-called crimes under the laws of this country. And then 10, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, peace, and people's community control over modern technology. And again, I'm paraphrasing, there's 2 more chapters after that. So this was written in the 60s. And these people were exterminated, right? Systemically brutalized by the police. Fred Hampton was murdered in his house next to his child and wife. So there is, again, the black card, right, is the card that everyone needs to carry, because these are people, and black activists worldwide have been fighting not just to end our oppression, but to end global oppression, right? And what I think you mean, what I think you're talking about is race binarism, right?
No, I think you misunderstood. I am on your side. I am talking about power politics in the top, the 2-party politics, Democrats and Republicans, Trump, and this situation. My question was, okay, have you had the incident, racist incident, went up during these years or not? And second, it was about power. I'm completely aware about Black Panthers and Black movement. I am fully on your side. It's about.
Well, in that way, I think the binary has created, the actual assassination of Black-led movements, the eradication of Black-led movements, and then I don't think actually that this kind of racist violence has increased. I think now we have cell phones that are able to capture it. And so I don't think there has been an increase. I think there's been only an increase in the awareness of white supremacist delusions, violence, and racism, and how every white person carries that, right? How so many white people engage advantageously with it. And so I think cell phones actually and Web 2.0 have been in many ways the true revolution, as Bell Hooks would maybe say, a soft revolution, right? In that it's making people hyper aware of what you're calling the black card, or systems of oppression endorsed by white people. So these Karen compilations are everywhere. You can now see videos of police brutality. If you didn't see enough black and white images from the 60s, now you can see them in color and on your phone. So I think there is a way where, Web 2.0, social media, for better or worse, and our cell phones in general is small. I mean, Vertovian, this is Ziga Vertov, right? It's a kino pravda. It's a cinema of the real. And I think the only thing that's sort of really deeply changed is not the incident amount or number, right? It's just that we have a kind of total cinema that can capture this reality, that black people are actually capturing their own reality, disseminating it and talking about it. And so I think maybe this is the answer to the question you're asking. The real change, I think, is that we, for the first time, have a black chattering class. This is Adolph Reed. Who's black, but Adolph Reed talks about this black chattering class, right? So we have a class now, an international global class of people, black throughout the entire diaspora, black diaspora, who are communicating with each other and who are posting these videos and who are saying, this was a white person doing this. This is a white policeman doing that. These are our performative white politicians, displaying this kind of white supremacist value. And I think what that chattering class has done is produced a lot of white political performativity. And so maybe that's more of that binarism that you're seeing out of the Americas right now, is that there's been a doubling down on white supremacist discourse because, again, this kind of white defensiveness, right, has produced such antagonism to simply black people sharing their experiences of white supremacist oppression.
Thank you, Kandis. I think we have to close. Thank you so much for your generosity. And I can hear it's busy downstairs, so I guess we head downstairs. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Kandis.